Rink-wide Vancouver. Jeff and Irf with you here on a day where, Irf, we've actually got some Canucks news to get into, and we will do that here in a sec. But first things first, I want to tell the people that Rink-wide Vancouver, a presentation of the Applewood Auto Group. And right now at Applewood Kia Surrey and Langley, you can get the 2024 Kia EV6. You can finance it from 4.49%, or the 2024 Niro EV, you can finance that from 4.99%. Remember, it's all good at Applewood. And it seems to me, Irf, that it's pretty good for Filip Hronek and the Vancouver Canucks. A long-term deal, 8 years, 7.25 AAV, a total of $58 million. And they get it done well in advance of Hronek filing for arbitration. They get it well in advance of July the 1st. So they got some cost certainty here as they move forward now, trying to figure out the rest of this roster.
Yeah, well, it didn't start with an 8, but, the Canucks got a tidy piece of business done, a big ticket. For sure. I mean, it solidifies that pairing of Quinn Hughes and Filip Hronek for the foreseeable future as the Canucks' number 1 and 2 defensemen. It's a lot of money, for sure. I think that there were some mixed reviews from people that you've talked to, whether it was in hockey circles or just the fans on different social channels, of what they thought about the deal and how much that it should have been or maybe could have been and things like that. But from the Vancouver Canucks point of view, I mean, you look at it and you say, okay, we weren't going to get Elias Lindholm. That was a priority. That one maybe have to move on from there. We're not really entirely sure what's going on with Nikita Zadorov. So let's take care of our next piece of business, and that's Filip Hronek. And they went in and they got it done, and they did so pretty quietly as well, if I do say so myself, Jeff.
Yeah, and I think, you point out it didn't start with an 8. And look, this is all part of negotiation. I like the deal. I don't love it. But this notion that the Canucks are getting this massive discount because somebody had floated the idea that it was going to start with an 8, I think this is a case of, timing is everything in life. And for Filip Hronek, the timing was perfect. A 26-year-old right-shot defenseman with arbitration rights coming off a 48-point season. The system was built. He was going to get a massive raise. He knew it. The Canucks knew it. And rather than getting anywhere close to arbitration where things can get a little bit messy and animosity can arise, both sides behaved like adults here, the way you want them to. And as you said, kept it relatively quiet. But $7.25 million in a rising cap world, I think it's a palatable number as long as they get first half Filip Hronek for most of, the early years of this contract, because he had 29 points in 35 games at Christmas. 29 points in his first 35 games. He had 19 points the rest of the way. It all added up to a 48-point season. People watched him. He was second on this team in ice time. He was third in shorthanded ice time, so he played a lot, played in all situations. And I wrote about this at Canucks Army that, one of the side benefits of this deal is not only locking up your second best defenseman long-term, but a guy that turned out to be pretty close to the perfect partner for your captain. And don't discount the fact you want to keep Quinn Hughes happy. Quinn Hughes is an incredible player on his own, but he was able to sort of video game turbo boost his season and get to 92 points. Hughes helped Hronek, but Hronek helped Hughes. There's no doubt about it. And together, the Vancouver Canucks have one of the best defensive pairings in the National Hockey League by the numbers, and combined are $15.1 million for those two guys. That's a manageable number for a top pair in the National Hockey League.
Yeah, you mentioned Quinn Hughes. He posted or reposted the Canucks thing yesterday, or the Canucks news on Filip Hronek signing, and wrote stud. So that those two definitely have some chemistry, and they've built a good friendship and a good partnership, right? And I think Elias Pettersson posted something as well, being excited about, Filip staying with the organization for the foreseeable future. Yeah, it's an interesting one still for me, Jeff. I mean, you mentioned the cap, and, later in the deal as he gets older, might not look that great, but with the cap going up, it's only going to be a smaller percentage of the cap hit. So I think that's an important thing to remember. Right now, at $7.25 million next season, you're going to need first half Filip Hronek all year long for people to justify that contract. And you're going to need him not only in the regular season, but Jeff, in the playoffs. What was his first point of the playoffs? Came in the last game of the playoffs. So you're going to need some, and obviously, with the health and things like that, whole guys can stay healthy through these things. But I mean, look, they got it done. Not sure I like the number, but if that was the number for Filip Hronek on an 8-year deal, and they offer Elias Lindholm 7 times $7 million, they wouldn't go up there. So it was one of those things where you just have to look at and say, okay, this is the Filip Hronek contract. This is what it's going to be. And good for him for going to get his bag. I have absolutely no problem with that at all. But from the Canucks point of view, you're going to hope you have some consistency with him and in his game for at least the first few years of this contract.
Well, and that's it. I mean, he's 26. Like I was thinking to myself, they locked Tyler Myers into a 5-year deal at $6 million per, and everybody hated that deal right up until these last playoffs where Myers played some of his best hockey. But they signed Tyler Myers at the age of 30. Yeah. This is a 26-year-old. Like, he is coming into his prime, and if he's playing with Quinn Hughes, there's every reason to believe that he can be as good as he was last year, and maybe even better. And I thought Patrick Allvin, I asked him about the two halves of the season, and Allvin, it's pretty clear that Patrick Allvin believes, whether it's Filip Hronek, whether it's Elias Pettersson, whether it's anybody else that underperformed in the playoffs, that like they have to take that to heart, and that has to be used as a learning episode, because Allvin said, like, we think that, there's more for him to give here, but he also talked about the disappointment, as you said. I mean, he scored the last goal the Canucks scored this season, and, trying to push the comeback in Game 7 against the Edmonton Oilers, but that was his only goal. He also had an assist. So 2 points in 13 playoff games, only 13 shots on goal in those 13 games. And that lends itself to this idea that elbow of his was an issue. And even if he didn't want to talk about it, it's been reported, it's out there. He was playing through something that was hampering him. So get him healthy, get him back to being closer to the guy that he was in that first half, and let him and Quinn cook and do their thing. And I think that for the next bunch of years, those two can continue to be dominant. And it's interesting now when you start to look at competitive window for the Vancouver Canucks, they've got Quinn Hughes for 3 more years. They got Thatcher Demko at $5 million for 2 more years. So it really does feel with cost certainty here now. And yeah, I mean, there's still free agency to come, and they've got to build out this roster. But, these next couple of years, this feels like go time for the Vancouver Canucks. And so Hronek wanted to be a part of that. Allvin said that it was the player that really explored the idea of going the max term on this deal. And obviously the Canucks are the only team that could do that. I don't know that they really ever were contemplating trading him. We'll never know now because they've got him locked up as long as they do. Let me ask you this one. 7.25 is a nice, healthy raise for a guy that was making mid-4s last year, but he comes in under Quinn Hughes at $7.85 million. How much do you think the internal salary cap for the Vancouver Canucks played a role in all of this, in keeping just the optics of keeping Hronek marginally lower than your best defenseman and arguably your best player?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that was a question, to be completely honest. There was no way that he was getting more money than Quinn Hughes, close to it. Like, I don't even think 7.5 would have been a number that the Canucks would have done for Filip Hronek. I think 7.25, take it, run to the bank with it. If you're him, be happy with it. That's $58 million you will collect over the foreseeable future, over the next 8 years from the Vancouver Canucks. So good for Filip Hronek. I mean, from the Vancouver Canucks perspective, they got something done. But yeah, it just goes back to it, Jeff. Quinn Hughes is your most important player, perhaps your best player on the team, and he's going to be paid like that. And, I think optically, yeah, there was probably maybe would have been a little bit of looking at it and saying, you're going to pay this guy more than your best player and the guy that's going to win the Conn Smythe trophy, the Norris trophy. I don't think so. So they got it done, which was a good thing. And I think it was a pretty quick negotiation talk, to be honest, by all accounts. When the reports came out that, things kind of quieted down around Lindholm and Nikita Zadorov, they turned their attention to Filip Hronek, and it got done pretty quick. So both sides obviously wanted to get something done. It was a matter of dollar cents, structure of the deal, and all of that. So a pretty good couple of days for Filip Hronek here, and definitely for the Vancouver Canucks.
You talked about some of the reaction in social spaces, and certainly anytime the Canucks do the kind of business that they did with Filip Hronek, you're going to see a fair bit out there. Again, it wasn't universal. I think there are a lot of people that say, hey, wait a sec, you're paying a guy $7.25 million to be a caddy for Quinn Hughes. Like, what about, carrying his own partnership or duo? And in time, I think that's a question that the Canucks are going to have to answer. But we know that, the cupboards are relatively bare when it comes to the prospect pipeline, certainly for next season. And Patrick Allvin was asked a little bit about plans for the right side. Certainly Tyler Myers still in the mix. They've got Noah Juleson. Thought it was interesting that Allvin sort of unprompted name-checked Cole McWard So maybe the Canucks see him as a legitimate option to push for certainly a roster spot out of training camp. We'll see what happens a year from now. Tom Melander, the guy that they took first round last year, 11th overall at the draft at Nashville. He's going back for his second year at Boston University. But a year from now, if he turns pro, this is the importance of entry-level contracts, because if you could plug him in, and we're getting a little bit ahead of ourselves here, but when I talked about Hughes and Hronek combining for against the cap at just over $15 million, if you can get a guy that steps into your NHL lineup on an ELC, all of a sudden you could have 3 of your 6 defensemen for a combined $16 million, and you get 3 years on the entry-level deal for a guy like Willander. So again, projecting out, that's not going to affect them for next year because he's not going to come out of school and turn pro for next season. But, you can start to see the idea here of what the Canucks are thinking, certainly long-term, if you could get Quinn Hughes and Hronek. And if Tom Willander can be the player that they think he can be, and that's not going to be a guy that dominates hockey games, but certainly when you're picking a defenseman in the top 11 of a draft, you're hoping that he's going to be a top 4 guy at the very least.
Well, Jeff, I think from a management point of view and even a coaching point of view, they need someone, whether it's a defenseman or a forward, every year for the next 3 years to come in on that ELC just to make this work in the cap era that they're in, just to make this work. I know it's going up and things like that, but they need someone, whether it's, you mentioned Cole McWard on defense, whether it's Archdeep Bains if he takes a step, whether it is Atu Ratu that does take a step up and becomes the player that they think he will be on these type of deals. So from their perspective, you go and you give Manny Malhotra that challenge and his staff of trying to get these guys ready to take that next step, because you look at teams around the National Hockey League, there are guys that are out there that are playing on relatively team-friendly deals, relatively, entry-level contracts and things like that for teams that do go deep into the Stanley Cup playoffs. And for the Vancouver Canucks, you're going to pay your top dogs a lot of money. If you're going out and you're going to get Jake Guentzel and you're looking for that, that's another $9 million maybe off your books. If you're going to extend a guy like Brock Besser at some point here, I'm not reporting, I'm just saying if that's something that you want to do, maybe a $7 million figure there. So there's a lot of room for all these things that need to happen, but you got to have prospects and you got to have guys coming up, at least one player every year making the team.
Hey, we put the call on social on our rink-wide Twitter/X feed, asking you, our listeners and our fans, your thoughts on the Hronek deal as we check in on the Great Clips chat line, a presentation of Great Clips with more than 4,400 hair salons throughout the United States and Canada. Great Clips, the world's largest hair salon brand, an official hair salon of the NHL. Great Clips, it's going to be great. At Hockey Rules 1 says, it's much better to sign him at the right price than trading him. We'd never get an equal value back. Plus, we'd need to replace him. And that is part of the equation there, that if the two sides just couldn't have come to a deal and, the threat of arbitration and the Canucks wanted to explore the trade route, I don't know what Filip Hronek's value ultimately would have been on the market, because other teams would have been inheriting a guy that was going to look for this massive raise. So not every team could absorb that player in that contract. And, I just don't know how many truly interested parties, plus you'd have to go out and find a replacement. So they avoid all of that and they make sure that they get the deal done. Adam on Twitter says, trading him never made sense, and I don't hate the number. All in all, I like it. So again, I'm having trouble finding people that love this deal, but I do think that people like the idea of getting this thing done weeks in front of July the 1st so that the Canucks can now sort of step back and really start to game plan for what they want to do. One of the things I thought was interesting, that we heard from Patrick Allvin, he conceded. And, certainly we've all kind of thought this, but to hear the general manager say they've come to the conclusion that they just cannot afford to keep all of their pending UFAs. So, it feels like Lindholm is going to explore the market. The Zadorov split isn't over yet, according to all reports. And then, again, just been remarkably quiet on Dakota Joshua. So I don't know if you've picked up on anything since the last time we recorded, but what do we make of Patrick Allvin basically announcing to the world that, they just can't afford to keep all the guys in the fold?
Yeah, if the reports are out there and it's true, and it was 7 times 7 for Elias Lindholm and he's looking for more, he's not going to get it here in Vancouver. I think that's probably a foregone conclusion. The Zadorov one's interesting, right? Because, you look at Nikita Zadorov and you look at what he wants, and you look at the Vancouver Canucks point of view and where he plays in the lineup. Like he's your 4, 5, 6 defenseman, maybe 4 or 5 defensemen, on most nights. He can move up and play if someone gets hurt, but are you willing to pay someone that plays those type of minutes? Recency bias, yes, I get it, how good he was in the playoffs and things like that. Upwards of 4.7 to 4.8 to $5 million. I just don't know if you can do that if you're the Vancouver Canucks. Now, I've heard that Nikita Zadorov's camp has come down a little bit from what they wanted, but that still might be a little bit too much for what the Vancouver Canucks are willing to pay. Again, it's not over. I haven't closed the door on this. I don't think anyone really has. It's been following this, but the closer and closer and closer we get to the draft here over the next week and things like that, and you don't see any movement or no one's talking or there isn't really anything going anywhere, the more likely it is that, he will explore free agency, because I think that they believe they can get a better deal elsewhere, right? Whether Nikita Zadorov and his family wants to stay here or not, that's besides the point. It's where can you go to maximize your earning potential, and in what city is it going to be in, right? If he's a guy that thinks he can make 5, maybe north of 5 on a 6-year deal somewhere, go ahead and do it. Go get your money. I've always said go and do that. Dakota Joshua, quiet, very quiet. And I think it's so quiet that they just know that this is one that maybe isn't coming. You look at teams like Colorado, you look at teams like Chicago, you look at teams like the Toronto Maple Leafs. Dakota Joshua could get a $10 million deal here out of this, right? So it's probably not going to happen here in Vancouver, but if it does, good for him.
So the draft comes up at the end of next week. Canucks don't have a first or a second rounder. They're going to be waiting a while unless something significant changes. And really, I don't know how something significant is going to change at this point, because I thought Hronek maybe was their biggest trade chip. If they peddled him, maybe they could have landed a pick that would get them back into either the first or the second. Whatever the case, we'll see how that all plays out. The draft's going to go ahead, even if the Canucks are sitting on their thumbs at their table. But of course, all eyes here in this market on July the 1st. And we want to remind you that Daily Faceoff Live has a free agency special coming your way on July the 1st from 8 a.m. until 11 a.m. Pacific time. Tyler Yaremchuk and NHL insider Frank Saravalli, former NHLers Carter Hutton and Colby Cohen, and friends from all over the league. 3 hours nonstop action as we dive into the madness of free agency. We'll be breaking down all the signings, discussing the impact on teams, predicting the future of the free agents, and giving you the inside scoop on all the wheeling and dealing happening around the National Hockey League. Catch all the action live on July the 1st from 8 a.m. until 11 a.m. Pacific time. The Daily Faceoff Live free agency special. You're not going to want to miss that. Now, speaking of Daily Faceoff, thought it was interesting, the report that came out earlier on Tuesday about the Canucks and this full court press on Jake Guentzel. Like, we already know that they had interest at the trade deadline, but it certainly feels like the Vancouver Canucks doing their best to get the word out that they plan to be front and center when the free agent window opens. You talked about Guentzel, 9+ probably. They've got the money to do it. It's a question of, is that the right move for the Vancouver Canucks?
Well, let me just say this. If the Canucks think that they're in the mix and are going to be in the mix around Jake Guentzel, it's going to have to be a very large amount of money. I think from all accounts, there was talk about him not wanting to play up in Canada, and then the reports came out saying that that's false. Well, if he's going to want to play in Canada, you're going to have to pay him the tax to play up here. And that's probably going to be at least another $500,000 to $1 million AAV. He's going to have options. There's going to be a lot of teams that are going to, want the services of Jake Guentzel. He's a Stanley Cup winner. He scores in the regular season. He scores in the playoffs. He knows what it takes to win, and he makes any team better, to be completely honest, if he's on it and the fit is right. The Canucks believe the fit could be right with Elias Pettersson, or maybe even if that doesn't work, play with a guy like JT Miller. And then you move Brock down and things like that. But for me, like, if they believe that they are this close or this, ready to be involved in the Jake Guentzel sweepstakes, that number's got to be north of $9 million. And I think from Jake Guentzel's camp, then you seriously have to consider it. Because if you're not getting that anywhere else on that open market, and you have a team that's willing to pay you that much money, what other country it is, if it's in Canada or if it's the United States, you seriously have to consider it. The other interesting thing is, Jeff, is Jake Guentzel's agent is also the agent for Brock Besser. So knows the organization very well. has been, dealing with the Vancouver Canucks for quite some time. So that's an interesting one to keep in mind there as well, if Ben Hankinson is kind of maybe pushing his client a little bit towards signing up here. But again, like I said, it's going to be a large amount of money, probably north of $9 million, because I think that that's where the market may be for a team like the Vancouver Canucks to try and acquire Jake Guentzel.
Well, it's going to be fascinating. It's been a few years since the Vancouver Canucks have had like a significant cash reserve to be big time players in unrestricted free agency last year. They were selective. They tried to target penalty killers. They were looking sort of in that second tier and did well on the first day of free agency with Carson Soucy and Teddy Bluger and Ian Cole, and then deeper into free agency with a guy like Pius Suter. But this time it certainly sounds like the hockey club is signaling to the rest of the National Hockey League that they plan to be there and that teams maybe are going to have to outbid them for a guy like Jake Guentzel's services. And of course, you get all the connections with Pittsburgh and all the staffers that were there. And you talked about the connection with Brock Besser. And it's about opportunities. And I think star players want to be put in positions to succeed. This is a 2-time 40-goal scorer, a guy that's proven that he can get it done in the playoffs. You mentioned that as well. He's got a Stanley Cup from his time in Pittsburgh. And so on the surface, the fit is there, but he's going to have options. He's going to have all sorts of suitors, and we'll see how it all plays out. Again, free agency, July the 1st. It's Canada Day, but in this country, really, it's hockey day. It's unrestricted free agency day, and we'll see how things play out when the window opens just after 9 o'clock our time, Pacific. Rink-wide Vancouver, for a presentation in part of the Vancouver Canadians, who are out on the road this week, but they're back at the Nat for 9 in a row, starting on Tuesday, June the 25th. And on the 25th, you can check out the superstar appearance by former Blue Jay Orlando Hudson. There's a fireworks night on Thursday the 27th. Of course, school coming to an end, so kids will be looking for things to do. There's a nooner at the Nat on Friday the 28th and a special Canada Day nooner on Monday, July the 1st. Catch fireworks, giveaways, Friday nooners, superstar appearances all summer long. Get your tickets. Call 604-872-5232 or go to CanadiansBaseball.com. All right, we are recording this on this Wednesday morning, and we thought maybe the Stanley Cup would be presented, but no. Not only did the Canucks get some business done, but the Edmonton Oilers look like they mean business, and their backs are still against the wall here, but they're halfway to the comeback, down 3-0. Now they trail this series 3-2 as we take a look at the Stanley Cup Final, and we'll get to our 4 wins segment here. And then I want to get into the Conn Smythe discussion, because that one is becoming pretty fascinating here. But we always take a look at, and we've done this throughout the playoffs, even back when the Canucks were playing, how many wins does it take to pick up a series victory? Of course, it's 4. And so our friends at 4 Wins Brewing have stepped up in a big way. And this portion of Rink Wide, a presentation of 4 Wins Brewing, family owned and operated in Delta. Come check out the 4 Wins Brewing tap room and kitchen located in the Tilbury area, serving beers, burgers, and their famous tacos every day from 11 o'clock in the morning till 8 p.m. And we always talk about 4 Winds Light Lager as well. Stock up, because there's more hockey on the way, and maybe even more beyond Friday night now as the series resumes in Edmonton on Friday. And then it would take the weekend off. And if Game 7 is necessary, that would go on Monday down in Sunrise. So if you're looking for, something to drink while you're watching these games, check out 4 Winds Light Lager. You can ask for it at your local liquor store or have some delivered right to your door through the online shop at 4windsbrewing.ca. Series score is Florida 3, Edmonton 2, but momentum is Edmonton 100%, Florida 0. I still have trouble believing that the Panthers are somehow going to slip on this banana peel to the point that they're not going to get it done, but the way McDavid's going, the way the Oilers are playing, that power play. So Florida's got the 3-2 series lead, but now I truly believe that it'll take a miracle for the Panthers to win on the road. I know they won there in Game 3, but I fully expect this thing is going the distance.
Yeah, I think the graphic here is going to say 3-3, and then, then eventually it's a toss-up, to be completely honest, if it goes to Game 7. I mean, Connor McDavid, though, Jeff, I think that it's him. It really is. He is him, to be completely honest. Yeah. I mean, the last two games, what he's done for his team, putting the entire team on his back. I think the quote after the game was, I like playing playoff hockey. Well, clearly you're very good at it. And I think this brings us to our next point that I wanted to get into a little bit as we talk about it. And that's the Conn Smythe, right? If the Oilers win or lose, obviously is brought to you by Bet365, proud partner of Sekeres and Price Canucks Conversation. And yes, us here at Rink Wide Vancouver. Open an account with Bet365 today. Bet on a huge range of markets. So whatever the sport, whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365, and use the code VANBONUS. Well, Connor McDavid is having himself a hell of a moment in the Stanley Cup playoffs. Will he, Jeff, if the Oilers do lose this series, win the Conn Smythe? He's the favorite to win here on Bet365, as you can see, but will he win if they lose? I know Bobrovsky got pulled, and then he didn't play well the last game, so it's kind of interesting now as it shifts, but it's been a long time since a losing player has won the Conn Smythe trophy.
I don't see any way that Connor McDavid doesn't win the Conn Smythe now, regardless of the outcome of this series. I mean, he's doing things that only Wayne Gretzky and Mario Lemieux have done in the history of the National Hockey League. Like, that's just ridiculous company to keep. And like, he's showing no signs of slowing down. In fact, he's showing signs of getting better as this. Remember early in the Canucks series, we were like, he doesn't look himself. He's not 100%. He's playing through something. And he wasn't a dominant force. He had a big second game against the Canucks. And then later in that series, he started to emerge, had his moments in the Dallas series. But, when the chips have been down here and his team needed him to take it to superstar level, he's done just that. And I mean, the move that he makes on the Corey Perry, like, I thought maybe Corey Perry had scored his last goal in the National Hockey League and was just kind of going to go quietly. But if you play with Connor McDavid, put your stick on the ice, go to the net, and good things happen. I mean, the play that he makes to just create the space for himself there, and then the tap in for Perry, and even the empty netter just to seal the deal. OEL, what were you doing? After OEL had scored to get Florida within one, and they came close. Bennett had that opportunity at the side of the net, but just back to McDavid. Sasha Barkov, he's trying hard. I mean, obviously got dinged early in the series. I don't think he has been all that prominent. Bobrovsky, as you mentioned, got pulled. It kind of feels like the Oilers have figured him out a little bit, or solved the riddle that is Sergei Bobrovsky. It was nice to see Matthew Tkachuk get back into the series because he had been awfully quiet to that point. But I just think when you look at the contenders, they're kind of falling by the wayside. And on an individual level, like, nobody's even close to McDavid, the level that he's playing at right now. So, I just think win or lose, he has basically emerged as the Conn Smythe winner now. And it's just a question of, I don't think that is in doubt anymore. Now it's a question of who ultimately is going to win this series.
Yeah. And I think that I agree with you. I don't know how the Florida Panthers are going to win Game 6 in Edmonton on Friday night with all the momentum that they have. And that building is going to be absolutely bonkers. I mean, you were in there for games against the Vancouver Canucks, and it was wild. And this is the Stanley Cup Final, and their teams just come basically trying to make it 3-3 and push it to a Game 7. So I expect the best from the Edmonton Oilers and Connor McDavid and company. Stuart Skinner hasn't had to be great, or hasn't had to steal them a game, because their captain's done that for them. Leon Draisaitl, a little bit quiet lately in this series. So it'll be interesting to see kind of what they do there. And then obviously with Evander Kane not playing, the Oilers have, found something different. That Janmark line has been unbelievable for the Oilers, getting goals and creating chances and doing things like that. And that Ekholm Bouchard pair, right? They're shutting down the other team's top lines like they have been all playoffs long, and they're doing it at an elite level. So I'm excited for the game. It should be fun, but I think we're going to see this one going on Monday in 7 in Sunrise.
The other funny thing too is, and you talk about Janmark, you talk about some of the lesser, like Connor Brown, the season arc that he has had from a guy that basically did the Ilya Mikheyev thing for the first half of the season. Like, he's setting himself up for this big payday. He's back now. He's back as a legitimate, like, scoring threat. The wheels are there. He was coming off ACL injury. I think, in fact, was it not Noah Juleson? I think in a game early in the year, like 2 seasons ago in Washington, where Noah Juleson caught him, and he was out of the Capitals lineup then. And anyway, I mean, absolute speed demon now, and the hands are catching up, and he's becoming earlier in the playoffs, we were wondering about secondary scoring from the Oilers, and he just seemed like an afterthought. But it's what you love about playoff hockey. It's this big stage. It's an opportunity for guys to step up, and it's the Connor and Connor show all of a sudden for the Edmonton Oilers. But Connor Brown has become a contributor in Edmonton, and I'm sure that's been welcome news for the Edmonton Oilers. So again, this series, just the stops and starts, and I get the logistics, the travel and the distance, but a game on Tuesday and now a game on Friday, and if the Oilers survive, then it's Monday. It just feels like it's never going to come to a conclusion, but it will get there eventually. And of course, not much time between Game 7 and the NHL draft. Game 7 will be Monday, the draft Friday night in Vegas, and Saturday as well, and then on to free agency. So we're getting there, slowly but surely, working our way to the meat of this National Hockey League season here, and we'll see how it all plays out. There's still time for you. If games are going on, then there's still time to play the Daily Faceoff Playoff Parlay Challenge. Each game day, answer 4 questions. You pick the winning team. You guess if points are going to be over or under. You predict the first goal and choose the highest scoring period. Daily winners snag gift cards, while each round's champion pockets cash. You play now at games.dailyfaceoff.com. Improve your puck prowess. It's fun, fast, and it's all about hockey. So give it a shot if you haven't already. There's still time, maybe 2 more games to go here in this Stanley Cup Final. Well, you and I have been recording on a weekly basis, waiting for some sort of Canuck news. So the wait paid off. We got the Hronek news on Tuesday afternoon. Are you anticipating anything else in the way of announcements from this hockey club between now and July the 1st? Or do you think that these free agents are all going to test the market? Or do you think that the Canucks will find a way to lock somebody up and actually make that announcement between now and the time the free agent window opens?
Yeah, I think the Zadorov one's still interesting. Again, not sold on it being completely closed yet. I mean, the fan base, if they didn't like the Hronek deal, they're definitely not going to probably like this one if they do get it done. I'm not sold on that one being done. I think the Lindholm one, probably that ship has sailed a little bit. I think he might go and want to test the open market and see what's out there for him. And again, it's been pretty quiet around Dakota Joshua, and all signs from that aspect point to him wanting to test the free agency waters as well. Are the Canucks going to make a trade here, Jeff? Is it one of those things that we can look into? I really do believe, and I think that there is an RFA out there that the Canucks have had their eye on, that they're going to have to move. If they want to acquire, it will be via trade. So we'll see if they're going to be able to do that. But again, we did this last week and we talked about potential free agents and that aren't Jake Guentzel. So maybe one of those names surfaces again as the weeks goes on. But unless it's Nikita Zadorov, I'm not entirely sure we'll hear anything too big from the Vancouver Canucks. But again, you never really know with these things, right?
All right. On RFA, they've got their eye on. Now you've piqued my interest here. We'll have to see how that. Again, I just come back to this idea of trade chips. It's hard to figure out, but look, this management group has earned the benefit of the doubt. They've shown that they can be creative. They've been able to reallocate money from different positions to areas of need. We saw that with the Beauvillier trade, and that was a couple of days later, and then they go out and get Zadorov. So they've been able to make some things happen. We know that they've been active on the trade front over the last 12 months, and we'll see if that pans out here as we move forward. All right, well, we'll continue to monitor things. Obviously, we will continue to roll out fresh content on a weekly basis. Certainly we'll do pods in and around free agency as well as news arises. But that's going to do it for this episode of Rink Wide Vancouver. We've got Jacob and Mike working hard behind the scenes. We appreciate all of their help. For Irf, I'm Jeff. Thanks so much for joining us on another edition of Rink Wide Vancouver, a presentation of the Applewood Auto Group.
Thanks for watching this video. For more great content from Canucks Army, check out Sakaris and Price, Rink Wide Vancouver, or our show, Canucks Conversation. We're your one-stop shop for interviews, breaking news, and a live Canucks postgame show hosted by Jeff Patterson.